with evidence to back it up, the observation that a very small group of people who are so extraordinarily wealthy that there is no precedent for it because there's never been this kind of wealth gap in the history of this country or the planet, and how they are now working on a political scale to do things that may affect your life, whether you like it or not, whether you want to pay attention or not, whether you're understandably tired of some of this in politics or not. And we're talking about how America functions. We talk about democracy and rule of law, and sometimes those things are thought of almost only in relationship to the government, like the understandable attention about the effort to overthrow the 2020 election. But this warning is much broader, and it comes from President Biden in the farewell address. And he did it in a very specific way. He clearly wanted to speak beyond the moment, the news cycle today, tomorrow, Monday's inauguration, and put a marker down for history, hoping people listen sooner rather than later, but for history, which is what farewell addresses can be when they work, and discuss how cronyism, corruption, and what I mentioned, the attacks on the rule of law, combined with powerful billionaire elite cabals, can affect everyone's life, and he argues America for the worst.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern.
If we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very optimistic this time around.
And that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people.
We're going to work with President Trump.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
That is just some of what the president said in the farewell address last night, and we covered it here on MSNBC, and a lot of people, of course, are getting ready for next week in the inauguration, but these things can matter in all sorts of interesting ways. Even the tech tools that we have, which are increasingly controlled with certain agendas by people who then try to tell you with a straight face they don't have an agenda, and you can decide for yourself whether you think Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg have agendas that have to do with their wealth, their self-interest, as well as politics that reinforce that. You can listen to them and decide. But even through these tech tools, we have evidence today that we didn't have in the first moments after the president finished speaking last night, and how his warning may have at least elicited interest in the critique that he was launching, because right after his address over the ensuing hours, the most popular search engine registered a spike in people wanting to know about oligarchies. These are Google searches for learning what oligarchy even means, because people obviously heard some of what the president said and wanted to know more. This is, of course, a reference to governments or power being controlled by a very small group of people, usually not representative, and usually with problems for everyone else who's not in the small ruling class. That's why when you hear the term ruling class, it often has a negative connotation. Now, the president also specifically spoke out against some of the concentration of wealth among people making money off technology, the Silicon Valley, the big tech. And he used a very important phrase, which you don't have to be a political science expert or historian to have a familiar ring to it. He discussed a tech industrial complex, a clear echo of Eisenhower's warning in his farewell address against something that proved to be prescient and a problem. And remember, you can like the military and warn about what you're about to hear, just like you could like some parts of technology and progress, but warn about the problem of that being in too few hands of people who are not looking out for you, or most people. They're looking out for themselves. And that's what Eisenhower was also worried about when he prophetically warned against the military-industrial complex.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well.
Very real dangers. This is not about winning another campaign. In fact, rare among any president who could run again. We all know this president didn't exercise the option that he was in the middle of to finish out that campaign. And he has no campaigns left to run. So he's not doing this for some rhetoric or political reason, even though the president is a politician like other politicians and says things for political reasons sometimes. But best we can tell, he's saying this in the farewell address because he seems to want to warn people about this concentration of power a few days out from an inauguration where we're seeing a kind of unity that you rarely get in American life. And it seems to be based on self-interest and in some cases contradiction of the tech chiefs' past statements about what they stand for, how they'll use their power, what they want their companies and employees to believe in. We are talking about Twitter, now X under Musk, Amazon under Bezos, Meta under Zuckerberg, Google, who has some chiefs that I'm going to show you in a moment, Apple, TikTok. All these chiefs will attend, and many of them, as we've documented, as you've probably seen, are suddenly taking very strong positions in favor of things they actually used to warn against, in an echo of how the Republican Party evolved under Trump. Musk is still the world's richest person. And for him, it's not just about X, where he has actually had some market share slipping and lost some money on paper, because what he's done with X politically may be benefiting him in the long run across his wider empire. Tesla is way up this year. SpaceX has government contracts. Musk will be speaking at an inauguration event. He also campaigned repeatedly with Donald Trump and at times got very close to legal questions as he not only spent money last year, which he can do on the campaigns, but even had raffle-type contests to see if he could give out money that at least critics and one investigation questioned whether that was designed to, in a sense, sway the votes. He's also in this special role where he's still going to take his government money, but he wants to, he says, cut the spending on other stuff. You can look at some of Musk's plans as cutting any federal spending that isn't heading towards his companies. Trump's hires, his allies, his advisors, and these billionaires are going to be a part of running the government. There are more billionaires, again, at a time where wealth is being more concentrated, heading into this government than any administration in history. And the money's still pouring in. Over $500 million after the election. Let me repeat that because we hear a lot of terms and numbers thrown around, but Axios, nonpartisan D.C. outlet, had this scoop, as they call it, pointing out that in a reversal of most situations where you have a lot of money before the election, people are rushing in. They said the money's, quote, pouring in at Mar-a-Lago. Trump doesn't have to lift a finger. Everyone's coming to him. Now, that's sourced to a Trump advisor, but the numbers don't lie, with or without who you quote, $500 million. And then take companies that have long outlasted different administrations who don't necessarily need to completely cozy up to one side or the other, but they might see what we've reported on. Donald Trump has made a lot of threats in politics and business, and just being neutral or just being, quote unquote, fair to him, that's not enough. He's demanded more. And some seem to be getting the message. Take Coca-Cola, iconic brand, long-standing. They are going beyond just, say, the normal lobbying they do or the donations they sometimes give even to both parties. No, they're doing something that they think will get Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump's attention. They're personally giving him an inauguration edition bottle of Diet Coke. This is 4 years after what you see on your screen, and this is why I've told you we are going to follow the facts wherever they go, including when powerful entities or corporations and their leaders contradict themselves. You see this inauguration edition Trump Diet Coke bottle here, which is really fusing the Coke brand, which is a mighty brand, with Donald Trump himself, and their statement, well, just literally 4 years ago, what happened in Washington is an offense to the ideals of American democracy. And in tech, where you have people who, remember, a lot of these tech folks say they're different than business as usual. They're not interested, they say, in politics. And if you've ever watched a tech conference, and we've had folks on this program, and we've learned things from them, and we've given them time, but a lot of them repeatedly say they're doing things in a new way. They want to transcend politics. Washington isn't where they learn how to do things, and they certainly don't play by the old rules of lobbying. And some of them spent really their public image and capital in the first term going out of their way to say what Trump did was wrong on immigration or other issues. And yet these are the people I just showed you, not only warming to Trump when it's in their interest now, but going to the inauguration, going out of their way, donating the money. And so we just want to show you, again, following the evidence, what they were saying in that first term as they now eat their words like so many Republicans have.
It's really dangerous to demonize the media. It's dangerous to call the media lowlifes.
It's dangerous to say that they're the enemy of the people.
As an immigrant and a refugee, I certainly find this election deeply offensive.
There are some values which are really near and dear to your heart. It's foundational and something which you should never compromise on. And
it doesn't seem to have the sort of character that reflects well in the United States.
Now the DOJ, under the Biden administration, again, has been doing this. Sometimes it didn't get as much attention, but what President Biden said in this farewell address is actually backed by policies that he's pursued. And he can't always get ahead of investigations, but they have looked at whether these companies are unfair. So I just showed you those Google chiefs and others going what you might call full Lindsey Graham, eating their words. But remember, the government, through policies and fair investigations where people can get their views out, the government was regulating and looking at whether these folks should even be broken up as monopolies, antitrust cases. And this isn't always getting headlines, but these were people that the Biden administration put in to at least see whether these companies needed more scrutiny, rules, or even to be, as I mentioned, broken up if they win the case to protect you, consumers, citizens. And this was dealing with Google, Amazon, Apple, and Meta. And there are agencies that, of course, have also done oversight of Musk's companies. Donald Trump has talked about an era of rule where that might not go as aggressively or according to the law if you are friendly with him, and the reverse if you're not. So keep all of that in mind as you have people who are trying to tell you that they're making changes because they just changed their mind, or with even more chutzpah, they're looking out for you, when in fact, as is often the case, it goes back to the business, back to the money, and back to their self-interest at the top, and not yours if you are in the middle or the upper middle or the middle bottom or all the way to the bottom, but basically the other so-called 99%.